Welcome back to Brainworms. I'm Paola.
I'm Joe.
Today we're going to be talking about some really interesting stuff, I think, if I do say so myself. Welcome to our second episode. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to the first one, if you did. If you didn't, that's okay. It's not necessary reading. You could just start here. Yeah. Okay, Joe. Are you ready for mine? I'm going first this week.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this episode, I really wanted to talk about something that I actually think about pretty often. It's not as inescapable as Labubu, but it's pretty up there. From all the memes to all of the quotes to all of the ongoing drama surrounding it, the thing I'm talking about today is the Real Housewives franchise. So I wanted to know, do you have any thoughts on Real Housewives as a whole, like the shows? Do you watch? Are you interested?
Yeah, I think you know that I do watch. You got me into starting with Beverly Hills.
Yes, as you should.
Yeah, so I do have thoughts. I got into the show. I didn't think I was going to like it, but you introduced me to it, and then I got obsessed. And, it turns out I really love not just the drama, but specifically the insight into humans and just people interacting with each other and the ways that people think differently, like especially people who are in very different life circumstances than me.
So it's kind of like anthropology.
Yeah. For me, it is an anthropological study.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I know you said I got you into it. So I first started watching Real Housewives in 2021. We had just moved to Maryland. And for some reason, I think we had Peacock at the time. So I was like, I should watch Real Housewives of Potomac because we live in Maryland. And it might be cool to see some of the places I live somewhat nearby. Not that we lived in Potomac because we couldn't afford that. No. So I started watching because of that, but honestly, that very quickly stopped being the reason why I stopped watching. I got really into all of the interpersonal drama, all of the characters, although they're real people. And even that taught me something about that particular area that I didn't know about before. I didn't even know Potomac was such an affluent area, even though it's not a representation of what living in the DMV is like. Truly, it's like a microcosm, and I found it to be really fascinating and really interesting. I also recently watched an episode of a docuseries on Max called Hollywood Demons. Like, the series is called Hollywood Demons. They have one specific episode where they talk about Real Housewives, the whole franchise, some of the darker topics related to the show, but it also talked about the show's origin, and that's basically what I talk about today. Also, of course, delve into some of the most iconic and dramatic moments in Real Housewives history.
Nice.
And also a little bit about why this type of TV is so captivating, and why there are so many reality TV and Real Housewives fans in general. So again, I'm starting with a Wikipedia deep dive. So according to Wikipedia, The Real Housewives was originally conceptualized as a reality TV reflection of popular scripted dramas like Desperate Housewives and Peyton Place. It was designed to show the behind-the-scenes, unscripted lives of affluent women. Apparently, the working title was Behind the Gates, which I think is interesting. It was referencing the gated communities of Orange County, which is where the first Real Housewives show started. It was Real Housewives of Orange County. Real Housewives of Orange County premiered on Bravo in March 21st of 2006. It followed 5 women who lived in Coto de Casa, an upscale neighborhood in Southern California.
So what does Coto de Casa mean in Spanish?
So I looked it up, and Coto de Casa means hunting reserve.
Wow.
Which is interesting. Not that it means anything, but, you know,
It has
whatever.
deep underlying meaning.
Mm-hmm. The show focused on family life, wealth, cosmetic enhancements, and the social lives of the women. Although it wasn't really expected to become a phenomenon, it tapped into viewer curiosity about wealth, privilege, and drama, laying the groundwork for the rest of the franchise. So next, we'll talk about a little about Andy Cohen's sort of like role in all of this. He's known as like the godfather of Bravo, and he sort of like I think he's executive producer, and he sort of oversees the Housewives. If you know anything about Housewives, he will always host the reunions, so he's sort of like looming presence over the Real Housewives franchise.
He's sort of like a audience insert character. He gets to be like our representative as the audience, and you know, if we wanted to ask these people questions as they're going through their crazy lives on screen, then he gets to be our voice for that.
Very true, especially in the reunions, where I don't know that he.
Only in the reunions.
Yeah, he also hosts Watch What Happens Live, and that's also like another opportunity for him to interact with all of the cast members. But as a side note, during the reunions, I don't know if he picks the questions, but they always pick the crappiest questions, like the most dramatic, the most kind of like insulting questions for the Housewives. So I don't know if that's Andy. The questions are from the audience. They're like sourced from social media, but somebody's got to pick them. So anyway, side note. So Andy Cohen, who was an executive at Bravo, was apparently initially skeptical about the Real Housewives franchise. He famously said that early versions of the show sucked and didn't really believe it would succeed. Boy, was he wrong. So, as we've already determined, Real Housewives of Orange County was the OG Housewives show. But after that, once Bravo figured out that this format was working, they figured out that they could replicate it for other cities in the U.S. So I will just go ahead and list all of the shows that are part of the Real Housewives cinematic universe and the years that they were released. So New York City and Atlanta were released in 2008, New Jersey in 2009, DC and Beverly Hills in 2010, Miami in 2011, and then it was again later rebooted in 2021. Potomac and Dallas launched in 2016. Salt Lake City debuted in 2020, and Dubai was added in 2022. So the franchise also went global with adaptations in countries like Canada, the UK, Australia, and South Africa. What differentiates these shows from Dubai, which I mentioned earlier, is that Dubai is the only one that was produced by Bravo. So all of these other shows were produced by other networks and were based on the Real Housewives franchise.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was going to ask.
As I mentioned earlier, too, The Real Housewives has really become more than a reality TV series. It's a cultural institution. It has famous taglines, iconic reunions, viral fights, and all of those things have really cemented its place in pop culture. The series has generated memes, very famously the meme of Taylor Armstrong from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills screaming, crying, pointing, and being paired with a cat eating a salad. So a classic. So yeah, there's all sorts of memes surrounding.
I remember when you were showing me Beverly Hills, and then we came to that episode, and I could like feel it coming. I didn't know, but like I started recognizing things like, oh, these people look really like they look familiar because I was just watching the show, but they look more familiar for some reason. And then like I saw it coming, and I was like, oh, this is where that's from. And you confirmed.
Yes, there's also the really popular Vine of how do you know what's good for me? It's my opinion.
Which one's that from?
That is from Orange County.
Oh, Orange County.
The show, aside from, like I said, it having launched international versions of it, it also launched a few spin-offs like Vanderpump Rules, Don't Be Tardy, and Candy and the Gang, which I've never seen or heard of those.
I've never heard of those.
Only Vanderpump Rules, just because that one got pretty popular, but I didn't know about the other one. So.
And there's also now Vanderpump Villa, right?
Yes, correct. So I mentioned earlier the docuseries on Max called Hollywood Demons that sort of like inspired, me talking about this particular topic on this episode. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the things that they cover in that show. So they talk about the origin of the Real Housewives franchise, starting with Orange County. They also mentioned the fact that the very first episode, like the pilot episode for Real Housewives of Orange County, was apparently really boring. It was like interesting in the sense that obviously these were very rich women, so like their life and circumstances were different than everyone else's, but at the same time some of them were still like working. So there's a scene that they showed where like this lady's just like sitting in her office like doing spreadsheets or something, and it wasn't what it became later, so it was very famously like super boring and not really an indication of what the show was going to become, but that's its origin.
That's interesting.
So the docuseries also interviews a few of the women that were part of the Orange County show, like the originating cast, and they talk about some of the good parts of the show, but they also talk about the ways in which the show affected them and their families negatively. With that, they also mentioned that the producers sometimes would tend to go in the direction of storylines that are more sensitive but make for better TV. For example, Lori from Real Housewives of Orange County, part of her storyline was that her son was really battling addiction, and eventually he got arrested. And this, like, sort of having everything out in the open and having that become like her storyline eventually made her leave the show because it became too much. The episode also goes quite a bit into the very famous table flip incident from the Real Housewives of New Jersey. And it goes into the story of Danielle Staub, who was sort of the one in the hot seat. They interview her ex-husband, who's the one who wrote the book that sort of mentioned her by her old name, which was like her, original name, quote unquote, before everything happened. She kind of quickly becomes in the show like a divisive character, not for the viewers, but like for the women themselves. And one of the things that comes to surface is that Danielle Staub is not her real name. She actually changed her name after she was convicted of a felony, and once the women discover this, in particular Teresa Giudice, after she discovers it, she sort of literally flips a table. Like she becomes really upset, and she brings it to the rest of the women, and that's where that very famous scene comes from. She calls her a prostitute, she calls her all these crazy things, and then gets really angry. So it's still like it's one of the most iconic Housewives moments ever.
Right.
Somebody who they included in the Max show, her name is Sachi Cole. She's like a culture commentator, and she also has a podcast. Shout out to Scamfluencers. It's a really good podcast. She says something that sort of like made sense to me, resonated with me. She basically mentioned that particular episode and that particular incident became so popular because it displayed like feminine rage or like female rage in a way that wasn't really seen on TV like very often back in like the early 2000s, which is when this originally aired.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was too. And to this day, that is like the most viewed episode of The Real Housewives.
Wow. Like
in history. So with that, I did want to transition into talking about some of the franchise's most iconic moments. The first being from the episode The Dinner Party from Hell, which is from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Season 1, Episode 9. In this episode, the housewives are having a dinner party at Camille Grammer's house, and Camille decides to invite her friend Alison Dubois, who is a psychic, and apparently the show Medium was inspired by her, which she likes to claim very proudly. A lot of chaos ensues, including the medium telling Kyle Richards that her husband will never emotionally fulfill her. And then after that, Kyle and Camille really go at it, and it just becomes a complete mess. I do think it's a little ironic that now Kyle and her husband Mauricio are getting a divorce. I'm not saying Allison was right, but like, I'm just going to put that out there. Another really memorable moment from particularly the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills is in season 5, episode 16, where Lisa Rinna smashes a wine glass. The ladies again are sat for dinner. Apparently everything goes down when they're sat for dinner.
Everything in that show, from what I've seen in Real Housewives, they save the drama. They save like all of their energy for the drama for dinner.
Yeah.
That's where it goes down.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's either dinner or on a boat. Because Beverly Hills in particular they've had some fights on several boats. So they're in Amsterdam and they're having dinner. And basically Kim Richards and Lisa Rinna were going at it. And then at one point, there's a lot of like quotes and like one-liners from that particular episode that are very famous within like the Real Housewives fandom, I guess. Kim Richards calls Eileen Davidson a beast, and then Lisa and Kim really get into it, and Kim basically threatens to reveal something about Lisa Rinna's husband, Harry Hamlin. Basically, it all culminates in Lisa Rinna saying, "Don't talk about my husband," or screaming, I should say, and throwing a wine glass and then breaking it, which is
throwing the wine.
Yes.
In the glass.
Yes, like doing this and then breaking it. Everybody is running around. My favorite part, I will say, is Kyle Richards like booking it. Like she was not really in the fight. Like her and Kim were sort of like fighting with each other because Kim didn't feel supported in that moment by her sister. But when the wine glass thing happens, everybody's trying to like calm Lisa down, calm Kim down. Kyle Richards is out the door, which is really funny to me.
It's smart.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Lisa Rinna was like doing like the classic like bar fight movie scene, you know.
So my final moment I wanted to talk about is actually from Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, which is not a franchise that I watch, but I would like to. It is from season 4, episode 16, which is the season finale. The episode is called Icy Apologies. So that show has a lot of drama that I know just from like knowing about Real Housewives, but again, I haven't seen it. Apparently this last season that came out, the last episode, became one of like the most dramatic because there was a really crazy twist. So at the cast final dinner in Bermuda, Heather Gay drops a bombshell. Monica Garcia, the breakout first season housewife, was actually the anonymous figure behind the notorious Instagram troll account Reality Von Tease, which had spent years attacking the women.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's pretty major.
That is major.
I saw online too that she wasn't the typical housewife and that she didn't come from a super affluent background, like especially compared to the other ladies on that particular show. She didn't really seem to match. So part of me can't help but like wonder if the producers knew that and that's why they included her in the show. But that's all just like my own speculation. So there's a really good video on YouTube by Broey Deschanel. The video is called How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Real Housewives. The video covers a lot, but it also talks about why this incident in particular has become such a big part of like Real Housewives history. Despite there being a lot of other criminal controversies surrounding like the show and also some of the show's like cast members. Okay, so Broey breaks down the importance of this incident into this. So basically the housewives, even though it's a reality show, a lot of them opt to sort of like create a character that is a heightened version of themselves. So even though they are portraying who they are, they're sort of choosing to maybe accentuate some things that they think would be good for the show and also to use that as a way of like self-preservation, because being in the public eye comes with a lot of scrutiny. But if they're sort of putting on a character, then the scrutiny is targeted at that character as opposed to like their real authentic selves.
Right.
So that's part of why what Monica did ended up being so unforgivable. She didn't really attack the housewives as characters. She attacked them as people, as she attacked their real character. And so that's what made this such a big offense. That, and also by sort of like infiltrating and being actually a part of the show and being a fan of the show, because in order to run an account like that, you kind of have to be a fan of the show. That also, not only was it her attacking the real people behind the Real Housewives, but it also created an opportunity for people to be able to see behind the curtain, to see like, no, these aren't really the people. The people that are on the show aren't like what they appear to be. Like, these are the real people, and these are all their flaws, because the account was pretty negative. Like it was used to point out all of their flaws. So that is what makes this like such a historic moment in Real Housewives history, and why it is being talked about way more than any of like the criminal offenses or anything like that that have also happened on the show. I also found a really interesting article from the website Junkee. The article is called "How Dare You Underestimate the Real Housewives, You Beast" by Stewart. It talks a little bit about how on the surface the Real Housewives just seems like a bunch of rich, catty women, but the show also has allowed those women to sort of accumulate their own wealth, and because they get paid by being on the show, so it sort of has also given them some agency, because obviously the name Real Housewives puts them in a context of being the wives of men. So this sort of like the show itself gave them a platform and an opportunity to be more independent and be centered in the conversation, as opposed to being just housewives.
This is starting to touch on a point that I was going to bring up earlier, which is that it's actually interesting the way that this show both like gives a platform to women very specifically, but also like encourages them to put on a character that whatever character they choose, they are still encouraged to like portray something very specific to the camera, that like can be, is definitely influenced by like patriarchy and the role that these women play within patriarchy, within the class structure of our society, because they're wealthy women, all these kinds of things.
So in this article, like I said, Stewart says, the show is built to allow these women, these wives, to flaunt their wealth, their lifestyles, and their privilege, mostly as extensions of powerful men. But if you look beyond that, the show allows us to see how women can forge careers in industries they've long been left out of, both successfully and sometimes unsuccessfully. Lisa Vanderpump is a restaurant mogul. Several housewives own alcohol brands, and Phaedra even works in the funeral business. Another point that he makes in the article, which the whole thing's a really good read, and just for the sake of time, I will just add one more thing about it, is that Stewart also mentions that the housewives are also viewed as icons regardless of age, and particularly in Hollywood, age is a big thing. Like for women, there's a lot of limitations when you get to be a certain age. So he also pointed out that the show surrounds a lot of women who are older and, puts them at the forefront and allows them to sort of like tell their stories. Basically, my conclusion after all of the research I did, and, I started out liking the show, so it's not like I was trying to find any reason not to. I think it's really easy to write off the Real Housewives as like trashy reality TV, and I'm not saying it's not, but at the same time it can still be that and then spark more nuanced conversations. While it's ultimately entertainment, the version of reality that we see on these shows often reflects real struggles that women face. The franchise tackles addiction, domestic violence, adult friendships, divorce, and many, many more things. And it does so by centering women, their emotions, and their ideals in ways that I feel like a lot of shows don't, like both fiction and reality TV. So as for me, I'm going to keep on watching. And I recommend that you get into it too if you haven't already. Okay, Joe, you're up. What are you going to talk about today?
I'm going to tell you about a historical figure named George Danton. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce anything right in this because this is about French people, and I don't speak French.
Right,
so,
right.
But I'm going to try the hardest I can without actually looking anything up in terms of pronunciation.
Oh, okay. I was like, I hope you looked something up.
Yeah, I looked up information, but not pronunciation. Yeah, so George Danton was a major figure in the French Revolution. The main reason that I was interested in researching this guy is that the French Revolution is very interesting to me. It is one of the major markers in history, in European history, Western history, but like world history in general, for the end of monarchy. The French Revolution was a major milestone in terms of attempting to radically change society based on ideals and empowered by the people that are being governed.
Les Mis and all.
Les Mis, exactly.
That's the extent of my knowledge, by the way.
Danton was born in 1759 in France, and from a very young age, at a very young age, he was attacked by a bull, and then later he got smallpox.
Poor guy.
Yeah, and so the result is that he was extremely disfigured. So this guy was not pleasant to look at. Maybe you can, in editing, throw some pictures up. There's no photographs, obviously, but
there's no selfies.
There's drawings. Yeah, he's an interesting looking guy.
Fella.
But what he doesn't have in looks, he makes up for in charisma. He was known for being a very good speaker, orator, and for having a very powerful voice and a very powerful presence overall. And overall, different people have different reads of the historical figure that he is, and whether or not he was motivated by, just gaining power, or whether he was very, compassionate and trying to make the world a better place. But, the best we can do is read what he's done and then try to learn from that and see and make our own judgments. A story from his childhood before I get to his more impactful events in his life. There's this story about how his one of his classmates was being punished in class, and this is a form of corporal punishment. He was having his hands wrapped, so being hit on the hand. Danton saw this and thought it was unfair, and moreover thought that corporal punishment in school was unfair, and so argued with the teacher, argued with the head of the school, and so effectively that the school decided to stop using it.
Wow.
Yeah. So this must have been the 1750s, the 1760s, and he's arguing in class and getting policies changed in his school about corporal punishment. Yeah, so that was his childhood, and eventually he moves to Paris and he becomes a lawyer. He gets married. He has 3 kids.
Doesn't hit them.
Does not hit them. I don't know, but I would assume. This is when he starts to get more active politically. So he joins something called the Cordeliers Club. I think that's how it's pronounced. This is like a revolutionary, group. It's one of the more radical revolutionary groups at the time. This topic is going to be, about the French Revolution, but I'm going to try to not make it an episode about the French Revolution, so I'm going to have to skip some details. So I'm jumping in to a point in the French Revolution in order to talk about Danton's role, where we have already placed the king under house arrest. All right, so that's the point we are at in the French Revolution. Something that the king does at this point is attempt to flee. So he attempts to flee with his family to go to another country. I think he was trying to go to Austria, maybe. They get caught, and they get sent back to France. Now, there is a decision that has to be made at this point about whether or not France is going to accept a king who is trying to avoid the will of the people by leaving, by like completely leaving the country. It's seen as treasonous. A decision is made by the National Constituent Assembly to keep him as the monarch. So they say, like, yeah, he tried to escape, but we're still going to have him as the king. At this stage, Danton is the president of the Cordeliers Club. I forget if president is the right title, but he's the head of the Cordeliers Club. And he, in this position, organizes a peaceful demonstration in a place called the Champ de Mars. This is a public space, and they're peacefully, demonstrating against this decision. But the National Guard is brought in to try to keep things under control, and somehow they start firing. They start shooting. So this is called the massacre at the Champ de Mars. After this, Danton, he flees. He has to flee for a little while, and he flees to England. Okay, this is where things start to get very interesting. So this is one of the events that I think is like the most important event in the French Revolution, and Danton was a major figure in it. At this point, we're talking about the summer of 1792. At this stage, the king, his family, they're under house arrest still, and Paris is being, the government of Paris now is the Paris Commune, which is like the revolutionaries' government, right? Mm-hmm. Established by, committees that were organized by the people. But this Paris Commune, by some people's estimations, including Danton, was very ineffective. So they really wanted to take action in terms of like prosecuting traitors, taking action, against the monarchy, taking action against various people politically, and they were not getting the results they wanted. Something that was happening during the French Revolution is that other countries surrounding France were also not happy with the French Revolution. So like the King of France was not happy, but the monarchs of other surrounding countries were also not happy because of the example it sets, the example it could set for their countries, right, for their people to overthrow them, right? At this point, the king is not overthrown, but like it's
headed that way.
It looks like it's headed that way. His power is definitely being usurped. People are taking away his power, saying like, we are going to decide these things. We are going to make up these committees. Poor people are going to be allowed into these places to participate in these votes. They had like a very complicated, not caste system, but a class system. They had a distinction between like active and passive citizens. And like passive citizens were basically poor people who met every other requirement for being a citizen. And they were like not allowed to vote or not allowed to participate in certain things. France specifically was in a war with Germany and Austria. And the Duke of Brunswick made a declaration. And this is called the Brunswick Manifesto. And the Brunswick Manifesto says, if you you as in the people of France or whoever, he says, if the royal family of France is left unharmed, then the city of Paris will be left unharmed. However, if harm does come to the royal family, then we are going to demolish Paris. We're going to completely mess it up. So this
was a threat, basically.
It was a huge threat. And he was saying, like, he's in war against France, but he's saying, like, if anything happens to the King of France, then we're going all out. Because more important to him than protecting his country against France is protecting monarchy against republicanism, in this case meaning establishing a republic instead of a monarchy. So it's just so interesting to see how the issue of class manifests here as like one of the key factors in the way that these events are unfolding, the way that it's impacting the mindset of everyone who's participating in this. So the Brunswick Manifesto comes out. It hits the streets of Paris. They're not happy. Danton in particular is organizing and bringing people together to take action based on this. This is pushed past a certain line. It's gone too far. So I mentioned before that they were unhappy with the Paris Commune and their inaction. And so he puts together a group that they call themselves the Insurrectionary Commune. They do this in the middle of the night. They declare themselves in control. They seize control of Paris. The committee that they were unhappy with, they declare them dismantled. And what that really just means is word got to them that they should not show up to work tomorrow. And they also declared that they are taking over control of the National Guard, which the National Guard goes along with because they're sympathetic. So now this insurrectionary commune is in control of the government of Paris. They are in control of the National Guard. They show up to the palace, the royal palace, with 20,000 people. Long story short, they put the royal family under arrest. They're already like under some kind of house arrest where they cannot leave their palace, but they're still...
they were still there.
They were still there,
okay.
And they were still the king and queen. Marie Antoinette, Louis XVI, they were still the royal family of France. But now they take them out of the palace. They put them in some other place. It's not really a prison, but they're locked up. They declare monarchy done.
Dunzo.
Yeah, they start referring to Louis XVI, King Louis XVI. Now as Citizen Louis Capet. Capet, I think, was just like his ordinary last name.
I see.
And so they call him Citizen Louis, basically reinforcing, like, you are not the king anymore. France does
You're
not
just
have a king. You're just some dude.
So all of this, well, not all of it, but like the 20,000 people showing up were like led by George. He was like, come on, you guys. Like,
yeah, he was one of the major leading figures in organizing this, like putting it all together.
As a response to that threat.
Yeah, as a response to the threat from the Brunswick Manifesto.
Yeah.
So there's a quote I want to share from him where he says, audacity, more audacity, even more audacity, always audacity. The context of the quote was like, this is the way that we are going to save France, is just by being audacious. And I think that is a good summary of like his character and the way that he approached things. He was always trying to do what he thought was right or do what needed to be done. So after they overthrew the monarchy, deposed the king, they still had something called the Royal Committee, and that like was in charge of the government. Several people were elected to the committee that got, forced out before by the king. There's also the position of Minister of Justice, which is sort of like the head of that committee. This position, Danton was elected to almost unanimously. A big majority voted for Danton to take this position. So now he's the Minister of Justice. He wants to take action. Before the deposition of the king, he was very unhappy with the inaction that was being taken by the government at that time, even if it was the revolutionary government. Now that he's in this position of power, the king is gone. He starts to use this position to root out people who were anti-revolutionary. Anybody who was, working against them on that day. It was August 10th, the day that they deposed the king. Anybody who he thought before was not on their side, basically, he wants rooted out. They start investigating. There's a lot of people he does effectively, successfully catch, imprison, and then they begin to execute people. And this is where the guillotine comes in. This is where the guillotine starts.
Oof.
Yeah. The guillotine is a symbol of the French Revolution because they used it a lot. I don't know how else to put it.
They were a little guillotine happy.
They were very trigger happy with the guillotine. That is one of the defining characteristics of the French Revolution, I think, is that it was such a hot fire, it just consumed. This is the beginning of a period in the French Revolution called the September Massacres. So the deposition of the king was August 10th, and so by September, massacres were rounding up people, executing them like crazy. And this is where people start to question Danton's morality, his whether or not he's really the person that we want in charge. Here's another quote that is particularly relevant to this time. So this is not yet the reign of terror, but he has a quote where he says, "Let us be terrible so that the people will not have to be." Later on, he becomes a member of the Committee of Public Safety. This is where the reign of terror really starts, is during his time on the Committee of Public Safety. Normally, the first name that you would hear associated with the reign of terror and with the Committee of Public Safety is Robespierre. So Robespierre is probably the first name you'll hear about if you want to talk about the French Revolution, maybe even before Louis XVI. Danton was also on this committee, and they majorly butted heads with each other. But during this time where they're on this committee together, the reign of terror starts, and this is where they're rounding people up a lot, putting them in prison. The prisons are now overflowing.
What was a reason to put a person in prison?
Oh,
was it minor offenses, or were these people actually
It was all
what?
purely political. So we're not talking about robbing people
so
or
their
anything.
Affiliation.
It's purely you expressed a sentiment that was monarchist.
Okay.
You made a joke, the wrong way that could be interpreted as monarchist. They want
Can't even make a joke anymore.
Yeah, but yeah, it was really it was purely political. It was, you have to be ideologically aligned with us, or else you are a treasoner. You are treasonous. They were very happy to be putting people in prison and then trying them and executing them. And sometimes these trials were very much just show trials. They were you put them up there, you declare them guilty, they try to defend themselves. No, sorry, execute. There's a point here in which George starts to feel that it's gone too far.
Mm-hmm. We're losing the plot.
Yeah, we're losing the plot. Robespierre, however, is, he's often portrayed in history as being cold and calculating. And, combined with other reasons that he didn't, they were butting heads, and now he's saying we're going too far. Robespierre is not happy with Danton. Long story short, George Danton is arrested. He's imprisoned, and then he is executed too. This is the end of our character,
Aww.
George Danton, executed by guillotine.
Oof.
Yeah, in 1794, at the ripe age of 34, which is exactly the age I am.
I'm shook.
Yeah. Yeah, so one more quote I want to share. It's his last words as he's going up to get executed. He says, "Don't forget to show them my head. It's worth a look." Basically because, he's so ugly and disfigured. He's saying, go ahead and give him a show.
What do you think is the takeaway from George's journey? Is it you can try, but you're still gonna die. What do you think?
I think there's two things. One is it's sort of just the lesson of the revolution, the French Revolution in general is like what constantly happened in the French Revolution is a back and forth of people gaining power and then persecuting their opposites, their rivals, their enemies. And then fast forward a few months, those people, the ones who didn't get executed yet, take power, turn around, and start executing you, right? Yeah. And like it just swung back and forth like that a lot. And lots and lots and lots of people were on the chopping block. So like, you know, whenever we're considering taking any action in this world, you just have to be mindful of like how zealous you're being. Like as justified as you are in wanting justice in this world, zealotry can still get you.
Yeah.
In the short run or in the long run. Mm-hmm. From Danton specifically, I think I get a similar inspiration of sort of having the motivation, having the sort of willingness to go for what you want, to like try to make things happen, and try to do the right thing in whatever way you can. And that can be a complicated idea in general, is like what are you really willing to do? And Danton was willing to do quite a lot for what he believed in, but at the same time it was effective. You know, it got certain results.
Yeah, he made change.
He made one of the biggest changes in European history. I mean, not just him. Like it was not an individual person. But he was a major instrumental figure in it.
What I really want to know is, where is our Hamilton style musical about George Danton?
There was a musical made about Danton.
Really?
Long time ago. I don't remember when the musical was made, but I know that they turned it into a movie in the 1920s.
Wow.
So that tells you how long ago it was.
So it's about due for a reboot.
Yeah, it's due for a reboot.
Let's get Lin-Manuel in here.
Yeah. I don't know who they would cast to play Danton or Lafayette or Robespierre.
Yeah.
It would be fun to see like a fan cast of the French Revolution.
If anybody wants to put together a fan cast,
I'd love to see it.
We would love to see it. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing. I did not know anything about that. So very cool.
Okay, that's all we have for today's episode. Thanks for listening.
We hope you enjoyed it. Please follow us on Instagram. We're on Instagram at brainworms_pod. I will leave it linked, as well as all of our sources for